Oh, just no. Okay, good evening, officers and members. Can I take any apologies for that? Code of conduct, please. Okay. Minutes of the previous, you're happy with those accurate record? Maybe have you signed as such? Okay. Before we begin, can I welcome Gareth to stand, who's taken over from Joe, the external auditor. Welcome, sir. Thank you. Right, we go after the passing order. Item 4, national non-domestic rates. Gentlemen, you're doing this one.
Thank you, Chair. This is the first of 2 technical reports tonight, the delegations back to this committee. There were some changes to national regulations around how national non-domestic rates had to be approved a couple of years ago, and this council took the decision that it should be the Audit and Corporate Governance Committee to approve the return of the NNDR1 form. Last year, when we received this report, you had to delegate the full responsibility of the form back to myself because we hadn't received the guidelines from government in time to fill in the form. This year, we did receive the first detailed guidelines just before Christmas. There have been some changes, and what that has meant is that nationally, all of the software companies that provide the NNDR information systems have had to make some changes to their systems in order that we can even gather the information to complete the form. They've been making those changes, and the changes have now been made, but it does mean that we still haven't managed to, at this stage, do a final estimate of what the business rates will be for Warrington. So although we have estimates in this report, the estimates are the best information we have at the moment and do still require some further work on those before we could submit the return. So what I'm asking the committee is, like last year, to bounce it back to myself to do the final sign-off, which is what happened every year prior to 2 years ago anyway.
Thanks, Chairman. A couple of things. I think the first thing, it might be worth just drawing out to members that on Appendix 2, page 17, that whilst we will collect an estimate of about £108 million in business rates, that's the net payable, the actual amount that we will have as a council is just about 28 million. And I think a lot of people seem to see a figure of over 100 million and think that's the money that we keep in the borough. It's actually not, and I think that's a useful figure to draw out given the big difference between what we actually collect and what we're allowed to keep. So I think that's a helpful figure to draw out. Now I think the other thing it would be helpful for Linton to talk about is the mid-Merseyside pool, this pooling arrangement that we have with Holton and St Helens, and just sort of describe that, because I know we've got a few new members on the committee that just might know a little bit why we've entered into that pool. So I think that would be helpful.
Anybody?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The 2 things are actually quite closely related. If I talk about the level that we actually retain, first of all, when the government changed the rules around nationalisation of business rates, what happened nationally is that local authorities get to keep 50% of the total amount of business rates collected as part of government funding. However, within that, there was a calculation done to assume whether councils were better or worse off funding across the rest of their levels of funding. As part of that, Warrington was assumed to be a well-funded, with less demands type of council. What that's led is to, as part of the business rates, we're called what is a tariff authority. And therefore, instead of keeping 50% of our business rates, we're actually paying part of that 50% into the national pool, which would help other authorities that were deemed to not be collecting enough through their business rates. So that does mean out of the £108 million of business rates that we would expect to collect, we do only get to keep £28 million. One of the things that the government introduced at the same time as localising business rates was the opportunity for councils to pool their business rates together. What we decided to do this time last year was working with Holton Council and St Helens Council, who actually find from a business rates perspective they're in the opposite position to us. They're both top-up authorities. what we decided to do was, if we put all of our business rates together, we then rerun the calculations about whether we were a tariff or a top-up authority, and across the whole of the pool of the 3 authorities, although we're still a tariff, it's a much smaller tariff. In fact, we get to keep 49% of the 50% across the whole of St Helens, Halton and Warrington.
So does that mean a quarter?
No, sorry, we do get to keep the 49%.
Right, okay.
There's a slight anomaly, and the other 1% goes to Cheshire Fire. What we did do, though, as part of that agreement, of course, the reason that the whole pool works is because there is growth and because Warrington is a tariff authority. So we agreed with the other 2 authorities that any growth, any increase in business rates across Warrington, rather than Warrington getting to keep 50% of it, we would pro-rata the additional growth in business rates equal to the overall business rates level in each of the 3 authorities. What that means is that instead of being a tariff authority and getting to keep 27%, effectively Warrington will now get to keep 33% of any additional growth. Both St Helens and Halton also keep some of that growth that Warrington generates, but of course, giving them some of that growth is better than not getting any of it and handing all of the growth back to central government.
By my calculation, that means about 6 million more, is it?
It's only on the growth.
Yeah.
It doesn't, we don't get anything extra on the level of business rates where we started off.
Oh, right, so it's not. So what do you think then, if it's not 6 million?
So at the moment, I guess what I'm coming to is that for the current year, whilst we know there are things that are happening around the town and there's lots of business growth happening, we haven't yet seen the full benefit of that business rates growth. And actually, it's probably only around about £100,000 growth that we've actually benefited from being in the business rates pool for this current year. However, we do know that there is massive development going on at Omega at the moment. None of those businesses yet have been rated by the valuation office, and therefore we're expecting, and the reason why we want to continue in the pool is we'll expect to be collecting business rates for those new businesses next year, and we will then share a benefit in that increased business rates across the 3 authorities.
So in other words, these are accounts are as they are then?
These are the estimates as they are at the moment.
Okay, thanks. Ian,
Yeah, I think Regent's given us a very sort of good explanation. I thank him for that. But I have to say, I find this pooling a very, very strange device indeed. It really is an odd thing. And my question is, I mean, I accept that with St Helens and Holcombe we have sort of, historical, good relationships with them, and it's a fairly compact area. But I mean, the way Linton's described the calculations, there must be some optimum grouping. How do we know, Linton, that we wouldn't actually be better, say, going in with Wigan instead of St Helens or Trafford instead of something else? In other words, could there be another optimum grouping? I accept that we couldn't have something down in Cornwall or up in the northeast, probably, or perhaps we could. But, well, yeah. But so, I mean, there may be a better grouping, maybe not such a sensible grouping, but a better grouping financially for us. I mean, what's your comment on that, please?
When we realised there was an opportunity to potentially form a pool, I guess a number of local authorities in the northwest weren't really looking at it at that time. So we did a piece of work ourselves and looked at the business rates position for all of the neighbouring authorities, just to see what the best arrangement was. Now, part of that is a financial mix. Part of it is who do you think you're going to get on with working best around these sorts of issues. What is the best geographical mix? I guess what we found was that actually the other 2 Cheshire authorities, with whom also we first of all thought, well, it made sense to have a Cheshire-wide pool because it fitted in with the Cheshire and Warrington LEP. Both Cheshire East and Cheshire West are also tariff authorities, so there was no point joining up a pool where we were all paying even extra money into the central government. We were approached by AGMA, who were also looking at setting up a pool themselves. Across the whole of AGMA, at the moment, only Trafford Council is a tariff authority, and a very small tariff for Stockport. What that would have meant is that if we joined in as part of of their pool, and they are setting up a pool for this coming year as I understand it, the amount of benefit that we get in Warrington would have dropped into that big pond of Greater Manchester, and we wouldn't have got very much of the benefit back to ourselves, which kind of left that if AGMA were wanting to do it themselves, really we were left with St Helens and Halton, and looking at their levels of top-up, which were pretty close to the amount of tariff that we had, it did kind of balance out and work pretty well. And with only 3 within the pool, it does mean that governance arrangements around it are much easier to manage as well.
Looking at it, thanks for the explanation. I think we'd probably be better off with the other 2 because Omega, as we know, is not just for Warrington, it's for adjoining authorities, and the 2 adjoining authorities who are also and St Helens. It does give us a little bit of a good hand to deal with it when we go into them and say, look, some of the your infrastructure should be improved because it will help Omega, and that's what's required. Because we're going to have some bottlenecks and starting to wear because of cross-boundary cross-boundary journeys that are going backwards and forwards. So we are looking to be involved with St Helens and Halton to try and improve their infrastructure, which will help us.
Okay, Steve, did you?
Sorry, 2 questions. I've just been doing the sums. Can you clarify if we'd not joined the pool and only been able to keep 27% of the rates, that's sort of 28 million, would the tariff have been the same, which would have only left us with 5 million? And then the next question is, before they changed the rules to say we could keep our business rates, how much were we keeping?
To start with the last one, before they changed the rules, 100% of business rates nationally went to central government and came back through the revenue support grant. Based on population, other social demographic, all sorts of ways that the national formula works. Now only 50% comes back to local authorities, so you can't really compare like with like because of the change in localisation of business rates. In terms of the tariff figure, the position we're in for this current year is that, give or take, as I said, around about £100,000, we're no better off having been in the pool because we haven't grown our total level of business rates. It's only the growth in business rates that benefits us. There is a risk of being within a business rates pool because if across that pool the total amount of business rates reduced, the level of safety net is much bigger within a pool, and therefore rather than the government funding the drop in business rates, between the 3 authorities within the pool we would have to fund that ourselves. So one of the things we've been doing throughout the year is monitoring the total level being collected, the total appeals, and any provisions for that sort of issue. And we've done a recent assessment of that going forward, and that's why it's so important that we know that there is the growth in Omega, and therefore there isn't a risk of us overall falling into that tariff position, and needing a top-up.
And it's impossible to identify what of the revenue support grant might have been attributable to business rates, under the old regime.
You can identify it nationally. You can't say necessarily what part came back to Warrington.
Anybody else? Okay, it's agreed that we bounce it back to Linton for his final one, and perhaps a quick note for the next agenda meeting for what we've actually signed off. Right.
Thank you, Chair. The second of the technical reports, hopefully a slightly easier one and a lot more in line with what this committee has approved for the last number of years in terms of the council tax base. I guess the other side of this is also a good news story in terms of the growth within the town. One of the things that is helping to mitigate the level of budget cuts in this town is the fact that we are a growing town, new properties are being built, and we are collecting additional council tax for those properties. What we have here is the very latest calculation of the number of properties within the town. It is an increase, and therefore these are the figures that we need to submit into the full budget process in order to work out what the level of increase in council tax should be. We've also included the number of properties in each of the parishes, which will have an impact on the parish precepts for noting. The other item that I think is probably important to pay attention to is the council tax support scheme. There's been no intention to change the current council tax support scheme within Warrington. It continues that nobody will have to pay more than 8.5% of their council tax if they're in financial difficulty. However, because of the way that is funded, we do have to take 8,681, the equivalent of properties, off of our total tax base so that we can fund that support to those needy people, which means that our tax base stays at 64,161. So the recommendation, we need to set this in order that we can set the council tax. So the recommendation is that this committee approves the setting of the tax base at 64,161. Just a slight amendment there of the recommendation. It actually says that the council approves. It is actually this committee that approves it, and it then gets, but it is a delegated decision to this committee on behalf of the council.
Happy with that? Just draw members' attention to 6.2, the movement on the Band Ds. This creates another windfall for some parish councils because the grant goes up, as it were, and that's what happens to increase the precept. I noticed that Great Sankey's got 200 and then 118, so that's quite a windfall they're going to be getting. About 10 grand, I would imagine, without having to increase the rate. John?
That's true. It's just on 6.3. I think there's an error there on where it should say Bruges, please. So not Bruce.
Oh yes.
Well spotted.
Australian police station. Any of that way? I'm happy with that. Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Thanks for that. That's great. So now we want to speak risk reports. Jean?
I'll take the risk report on behalf of Catherine, who's put the report together. It gives you a high-level summary, as at the end of September 2014, the strategic risks that the council faces, and it shows you sort of activity during quarters 1 and 2 of last year, of this financial year. It also gives you an opportunity to comment on the risks that are detailed there in the register. Think about areas that you feel, from your experience, could possibly be missing off the register, and also ask you to think about sort of assurance as well. So as part of this committee's remit, how do you get some of the assurance on some of the risks that you see here detailed in the risk register? There has been some movement during the year, during the 2 quarters, and some of the risks have been merged. If you look at the table after 3.4, I'll just go through some of the movements that have gone through on the register and the details in Appendix 1, which details all the risks. So there is a new risk, the failure of safeguarding arrangements or possible failure. It has been included on the risk register before, but was removed, but it's felt now that that should go back onto the strategic risk register. Families and wellbeing feel that this is, there is a risk there that could be a safeguarding incident, and they want to keep that on the radar there and put that back onto the register. They've actually removed a risk around the access to the government's public service network. We've got compliance in July last year, so that risk isn't there at the minute. It is something that could bubble under again as the requirements change. So that again is something that we'll keep an eye on. And then there's been mergers of some of the risks that they've noted there, and they've sort of broadened out some of the strategic risks to show how some of those are being managed. So for instance, the one that's been brought now into the first risk on the register, we've got a joint management arrangement there across families and wellbeing, and then with the Resources and Strategic Commissioning Directorate as well. One of the risks there requiring further assurance, I think we've had some discussion on this before, is...
What was that, Jean?
Sorry?
You've moved across the papers.
Also, I'm just on the table on the introduction report, the table under paragraph 3.4, sorry. I've not gone into the detail of Appendix 1. You've got paragraph 3.4 on the report, it's just a summary table under there. It just shows you the summary of movement on the risks over the last two quarters. Down at the bottom of that table on your page 266, it talks about further assurance being needed on the work around the regeneration projects. So I think that's been brought out before at the committee. There was going to be some extra assurance required by both Linton and Tim, but I mean, I think there have been things put into place there around the regeneration board, and the two statutory officers think that the risks are monitored and challenged as part of that board. So there is a change there with the regeneration board coming on stream. And we've got a note there that most of the risks have remained static. They are fairly high-level strategic risks. And then they're detailed there for your review. I mean, I'm happy to take any questions or take any questions back if need be.
Go on.
Thanks, Chair. It's in relation to SR12 on the PSN network.
Yeah.
I'm just querying that one of the key issues with our members with the PSN networks was that our equipment at that time was not compliant. We're now going through a process of new computers and iPads. That's only just started. Is it best not to leave that in until everything is completed?
Well, I think this...
Did you want me to take that on? IT comes under myself, so I'm probably the best placed to actually answer that question directly related to the PSN network. When we had our PSN accreditation signed off, one of the outstanding items was the rollout of new kit across the whole of the council, not just with members, also with officers across the council. What we had to give them was our project plan of how we would have rolled out all of that new kit that would be completely Windows 7 compliant before the end of March this year. So we had a whole project plan around that, and as we're working through that, at the moment we believe we will have delivered that entire rollout in plenty of time in order to meet the criteria that they set us as part of signing off our PSN compliance.
Yeah, happy with that.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Just a couple of things on page 258. The new risk, I think it might be worth just clarifying that we've not had a failure of safeguarding. It's just that it's such a high-profile issue around the country at the moment that it's important to put it in. I think I'm right in saying that, aren't I?
That's right.
Okay, that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, at the bottom of that table, risk requiring further assurance. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, we are now talking tens of millions of pounds of contracts with partner organisations, and I think there is some great concern that that money is leaving this local authority and is going to partners, and we want to be assured that they are spending it wisely and that there isn't impropriety with taxpayers' money. So I think that's really important, and sort of developing that. It's not only these regeneration projects, but over the last year or so, more of our money has gone to partner organisations, and I'm thinking, some of these community interest companies, and that we need to be reassured there, and I think it will be mentioned later on this evening, that they are managing taxpayers' money as well as we think we would like to do, actually. So, I think that's a really big thing to go in, and I think it's so important that these regeneration, it's not only we have a partner, but they themselves will have partners, they'll have subcontractors, and we just want to make sure that there isn't impropriety with taxpayers' money. You can just see potential for things going wrong there. And I am concerned, it said a meeting was to be scheduled, which has not taken place. So I suspect, the thing there is the sooner the better, really. Let's get on top of this before these projects develop much further down the line. Thanks, Chairman.
Yeah, thanks for that, Paul. In addition to what you raised now about the fiduciary responsibilities, how do we monitor the fact that the contractors are fulfilling the council's ethical positions?
It's in each contract.
But do we actually, does anybody got into contract compliance to make sure they're doing it?
Well, I mean, that was certainly, as we come on to the next paper around the officer governance group and the update, that was certainly one of the points, if you remember in the annual governance statement, was at the end of 13-14, there was an area that really did need to be looked at. The whole of our contract monitoring and management arrangements really need to be looked at, and it's exactly the point that Paul just made about the robust management of some of our contracts. And the ethical values that the council hold, that is sort of transferred over to our partners as well and the people that we contract with. There's certainly been debates within, I know from the procurement team and different areas in the council, and we have a strategic procurement panel as well. There's been a lot of debate at the meetings around that. But for each individual contract, that is something that really does need to be looked at.
Ian?
Yeah, just on the same point, the bottom section there, just for clarification, I mean, it says that the meeting was to be scheduled but hasn't taken place. And then at the top of the page it says we've got the regeneration board. Now, are we saying that that meeting doesn't need to take place, although it's on a specific topic? Because the more general regeneration board will cover everything that that meeting would have done, but perhaps even on a more regular basis, because I don't know how often it meets. So I just wanted to know what just clarification, please.
Is there going to be a meeting, I think, or has it been sorted?
The regeneration board meets on a regular basis.
So that suffices?
Yes.
Okay.
So just clarifying, what's the function of the regeneration board? Is that to say we'll spend money on this to provide regeneration, in which case they can't really be monitoring their own decisions as to whether they're good decisions?
Yeah.
The regeneration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the regeneration board was established to review a number of the regeneration schemes that the executive board had already put forward and agreed. There are quite well, you all know how many we have got, and quite a large number of large regeneration schemes around the town. A number of those, the way the executive board took the decision was to delegate the responsibility for making those move forward back to the executive director for environment and regeneration. That, I guess, was a lot of decisions for one particular officer, and therefore, in order to help that officer with some of those decisions, the regeneration board was established, that the difficult decisions could be discussed with them before he took what was a delegated decision. And then that officer publishes those delegated decisions because they are key decisions, but it avoided reports needing to go backwards and forwards to the executive board over contract negotiations with large developers.
There's a referral, isn't there, above a certain amount?
Right, officer?
Isn't there a referral above a certain amount and say that it's got to
Yes.
consult with the regeneration board over a certain amount?
Which was what was put into the reports in terms of the delegated limits. Yes.
50,000, wasn't it? 50,000.
Well, a key decision is over 250,000. But sometimes a key decision isn't necessarily even a financial amount. It could be something that's going to have a much wider impact on the population.
Sorry, just to come back on the section SSR, the risk requiring further assurance. I suppose we could add to that. Not only have we got these regeneration projects, but and I'm a member of the Treasury Management Board, we are making very substantial loans to registered social landlords, which to some extent could be deemed to be sort of some regeneration because they're rebuilding and modernising. And I'm just wondering whether that should be included in that as well, to make sure that, and yes, I am on the Treasury Management Board, and we look at the soundness of those loans, but you know, we probably also need to make sure that these organisations don't get 20 or 30 million pounds of money, save themselves happy days, and they all award themselves some sort of pay increases, and there are a lot of personal benefits rather than what we'd intended with that loan money. Now, I don't know whether that could slot into there as well, or whether that actually needs to be a sort of a separate section. I'm very open-minded, but I think it's worth just addressing because we are talking very substantial sums of money there as well.
I think that might be worth your discussion with the next Treasury Management Board.
Yeah.
It's Treasury Management Board lasts as long as it needs to, meets during the day, and it's quite informal and very intense at times. So we go into depth in that and report back. So that's agreeable.
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks, Chairman.
But would that report come back to us then?
Yes, you get
Because that's the request.
We'll publish the minutes.
Come back to a meeting.
Yeah.
Agenda.
Anything else on item 7? All happy with that? Okay, then we've got item 8.
Okay, thank you, Chair. This is the report from the Officer Governance Group in relation to the work that's been undertaken so far for 2014-15. And this goes into detail on the improvement action plan, the focus for the group that they have during the year. And it gives you some of the assurances of the work that the Officer Governance Group do around this sort of scrutiny of the strategic risk register and the governance arrangements in place and so on. And also, as part of this, all the underpinning risk management arrangements, because as well as the strategic risk register, you do have these risks at directorate level, and you do have some of the risks that you've talked about there have been debated and are included on directorate risk registers. And it's to make sure you've got the full information that you need around the governance arrangements and so on. Just details work around the Code of Corporate Governance. We're just in the process of reviewing the code at the minute, and we'll bring any updates back to you in the next, I think it's the April meeting. And then it gives you a little bit of detail of the work undertaken during the year. And at section 4, you'll see the sort of things that the group do and the sort of things that they work through. And I mentioned the annual governance statement from last year. Any actions that came out of that, we had a couple of significant governance issues, as we mentioned, one of them being around contract management. The group have that on their action plan, and anything else that they've had that they've been dealing with, they'll monitor the actions from there, and they'll ask people to come in and give assurance into the group and make sure that areas are sort of being improved and so on. And the work that the group do, that pulls together the assurances that are needed to put the annual governance statement together again for this year as we go through. I've listed there the actions that came out of the annual governance statement from last year at 5.2 and 5.3. And you'll see it was the areas around the major capital schemes and the monitoring of contracts. So areas that are very high profile and are discussed quite a lot throughout the meetings that we have. And that's just for information and for you to consider, but I'm happy to take any questions again on the work of that group.
Excellent. Are there any comments or questions, Ian?
Yes, at 5.4, the sickness absence, which has always been one of my sort of pet topics. I mean, I know when I was lead, I was always concerned about it, because you used to see the figures between the public sector and the private sector, and the public sector was considerably worse, and Warrington I don't think did particularly well. Now, every time I ever see a statement on this, we're always improving, but there's always more to do, and I understand that, but I mean, it's a difficult topic, I know that, but it does worry me, because I've been seeing this for years and years and years, and it's still there. So, I mean, I realise perhaps I'm asking the wrong people, but it's in your report. So I just wonder if there's anything more that we can do to try and sort this out, so that one day we can say it is as good as we would reasonably expect it to be. I've never seen that.
John?
Maybe I'll help you in this. The organisational and improvement committee receives regular feedback from HR. There's actually a working group under the customer working group to look at sickness and absence, and there's been clear indications that the improvements have been are taking place, but it's an issue where I believe that the work that's been done to improve and to help and to guide people isn't an instant formula. So it's a program that we are seeing steady kind of decreases and it's continually being monitored, and the HR are kind of working with the areas that have still got significant issues, but even they are improving. Okay.
Thanks for that, John. Anybody else wish to comment on? Okay, I'm happy with that then. Okay, thanks for that. Can we go on to item 9, Grant Thornton and
Thank you, Chair. I'll take this, which is one of 2 items that we as the external auditors have on the agenda this evening. Hopefully we'll have a chance to look through this short letter which we drafted and sent to Linton at the start of the month. This reflects the point in the audit year where we're just completing the work on the previous year, and we've just started on the 2014-15 audit. The purpose of this letter is basically to formally report to you that our work on certification and claims that the council submitted to us for audit for certification has now been completed. The regime has changed somewhat in that there was only actually one claim where we were actually required to certify the return submitted to us in accordance with instructions issued by the Audit Commission. It's quite a big claim in that it relates to housing benefit, and what I'm really pleased to report is that this year we were able to certify the claim after completing our detailed programme of work with only a minor amendment, which is actually set out, and the amendment was just for £12. This is a really positive outcome because, as I'm sure members will have heard previously in reports to this committee, a high proportion of claims nationally are subject to qualification, and I'm pleased to say that wasn't the case for the authority this year. It's also important to note that the fact the claim wasn't qualified this year also puts the authority in a really good place as regards the 2014-15 work, as it means we go into that piece of work without a history or prior year errors to address. So it's a really positive outcome, and I think the officers involved in delivering that outcome should really be congratulated, because it's really pleasing to know. I'm happily taking any questions relating to this short report, if there's anything that members wish to discuss.
Paul, are you going to tell us where this £12 is out of £57 million?
Well, before I come to that, I might have an answer, but I think I'd like to lead the congratulations, actually. I mean, I've been on this committee, along with you, Chairman, for, I think, 7 years. And I think in those years, we've always had a degree of qualification required. And congratulations is due, actually. I mean, this is a large sum of money. £12 was the variance. And sometimes in accounting, what tends to happen is the pences sort of get rounded up or down, and just maybe when somebody then recalculated and added the pences in, that you arrive at that £12. It's normally a rounding. You don't normally work in pence when you're doing sort of large accounting numbers, and maybe that is the reason why. I don't know, but it's, you know, Linton and his team I think should be congratulated.
Good. I agree.
It is
the
a
next
really...
time the Prime Minister's in town, will you perhaps point out?
I always do. I always comment on things that I see are maybe not as they should be, Chairman. You can rest assured of that. Rest assured.
I'm sure you have it here.
I wouldn't say that, but yeah. So congratulations, actually, and no further comments.
Any other questions? Well, thanks very much for that. And I say it is nice to have legal qualified.
Yeah.
Okie dokie. We now go on to item 10, which is me. This is the point of the year where we do our self-assessments. And first of all, we need to form a panel. Those of you who've done it before will know that it's a serious exercise, and we do very strictly criticise the workings of this committee and any shortcomings that need to be addressed or any changes in procedures. It takes about, what, 2 or 3 hours. We normally, I say, meet one afternoon. Whether anybody else wants to volunteer for it. Otherwise it's usually me and the usual suspects. It looks like it's going to be me and the usual suspects then, doesn't it?
Yeah. Volunteer again. I mean, my concern is that, you know, we've done it for a few years and maybe it needs a fresh pair of eyes. But if there aren't any volunteers, then, as always, you'll suffer me, I suppose, really. I'll put my name forward again. But, you know, I'm happy to stand aside.
And Steve, are you volunteering?
I'll volunteer in the absence of any others rushing forward.
Brian, are you joining us?
My arm was at my back.
Yeah. Anybody else say it's
That's quite admirable at the moment.
Okay, and then just, what's the final date, Jean, that we have to?
We don't really have a date, it's for your own self-evaluation, it feeds into your own
Well, I don't
report.
Yeah, we'll work out a date at some point. When the sun's shining. But we'll get it done. So item 11, Simon, now is you.
Thank you, Chair. This is just one of the two reports that we bring every year to the committee to update you on the work that we do to manage the risk of fraud. It's the format that you'll be familiar with, so I'll just go through a couple of the key points, if I may. Just to let you know, the protecting the public purse information that we have from 3.2 onwards, that's the last exercise that the Audit Commission will be doing to gather this information. I think members have found it a useful means of comparing the national figures to the figures that we report. So at the moment we're not sure what's going to replace that and whether we will get this intelligence in future to give us a national picture. So this is the last report. Just draw your attention to the table in 3.3. You might notice that the other frauds figure, it's not actually a typo for Warrington, we did only report £300. There's a number of reasons why that seems quite a low figure. Partly, yeah, 3.3. Partly that's because we think in a number of the areas where other authorities are vulnerable to fraud, we do actually have some good controls in place here, and that is borne out by the work that we do. There are some areas that come in the national figures under other frauds that don't apply to us, so there's things like right to buy frauds in there. And I think that figure for other frauds, when you look at the average for some of the types of frauds that occur in there, there's probably only 1 or 2 cases in an authority each year, so it does vary over the years. So, I mean, we're not complacent about the fact that that's a low figure, but I think it does give some reassurance. Generally, that level of other frauds has increased over time. So we do have things like social care and insurance frauds. And I'll come on to some of the things that we're going to do about that. In 4.2 is just to let you know that we're doing the annual data matching exercise, so we'll be working on the results of that soon, and we will publicise any outcomes from that. In 4.7, we're just working on a publicity and fraud awareness campaign throughout the council, which we're calling Spot It, Stop It, so that'll be rolling out soon. So that's encouraging staff to raise any concerns that they may have. And then in 4.10 and 4.14, just to let you know that we've had 3 bids accepted by the government for counter fraud fund monies. We did quite well nationally in comparison to some other authorities and in the region. So we had 3 bids there. So 68,000 for a project that we're doing in internal audit to look at procurement and insurance fraud, and some money in benefits, and they're going to be working on tenancy fraud as well. So I think that'll be a significant resource for us to actually go and do some proactive fraud work in a number of areas. And then finally, just we've got some updates on benefits work and trading standards work. The trading standards work refers to frauds and scams on consumers. It's just also to note as well that the council can be vulnerable to these. I had a case referred to me this morning from a school that has had rather threatening phone calls from a bogus bailiff. So the council itself is vulnerable to these as well as members of the public. So we do put alerts out to make sure that everybody in the council is aware of these sorts of things. So that's the report. I'm happy to take any questions on it.
Thanks, Simon. Paul and then Brian. Anybody else understand that? Paul, yeah.
Thanks. Just to clarify, I mean, in table 3.3, we're looking at £503,000 and 282 is the number of cases. Well, Simon, do you have an indication of the range of values of fraud? Because obviously you've got an average figure there, which I guess is about £1,700. But, you know, that can be skewed by one big case of £300,000, or have you any idea of the range of these frauds? What sort of smallest ones and the largest ones that make up that figure?
Yes, if we look at the benefits frauds, we've got some figures from the benefits section here. There were 6 cases valued between 20 and 30,000 and 5 between 10 and 20,000. suppose if you add that up, that probably accounts for about half of that. And then the other numbers would be smaller figures.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Same point, really, Mr. Chairman. It's useful to see the spreads of distribution, because then is it just one or two large frauds which is skewing the whole thing, or are there a large number of other things? So a bit of information on the breakdown in future would be helpful.
I agree. It probably would be silent because the press do get hold of these. You may as well be good properly. There's always been something in the paper recently, wasn't there? Totally propagandist thing, as usual.
Yes, I mean, when we do the annual report at the end of the year, we do put the figures in for the number of cases as well.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick comment around 4.7, Stan, and this spotted shopping campaign. You say that's about to be launched, and that's going to be right across the coast. You're just going to agree what format's that going to take, and the reason why I'm asking, Chair, through yourself obviously, is this something that we could bring to the next meeting? Maybe a presentation on that, would that be a viable format for this meeting?
Yeah, just to give you an overview of what we're doing, I mean, we're working on the mechanisms of how we get it out. What we'd like it to be is a rolling sort of programme of awareness raising, so that, because we did, when we last reviewed the whistleblowing procedure 2 or 3 years ago, we did a publicity exercise there. We got some responses from that, but once you don't publicise it for a couple of years, it dies away. So we're trying to do a rolling programme, so there'll be a mixture of sort of the usual articles in your voice and internal communications, but we're also wanting to make use of the social media, so the new Winning Network. So I'll be doing a fraud blog and trying to encourage people to follow that. I've just been talking to Cons today about how we keep a rolling programme, so we might look to do some events during the year. There's a National Fraud Awareness Week in November, so I think we look to build up to having a fairly significant programme of events to support that national awareness. So it's a rolling programme, but I mean, I'm quite happy to come back and brief on what we're doing.
Yeah.
It might be an opportunity to have one of our 6 o'clock sessions.
Yeah.
In fact, tonight actually, the witnessing was cancelled last minute, but maybe for a future reference. Okay. John, do you want to add a
Just a little bit more information on 416, which is where we're going to lose our role team with the loss across the DWP. I know it's early in the planning stage, but would we get a report that in a similar form that we had this evening about council tax and benefit? And it would no longer be our responsibility?
We'd be reporting on council tax support, which would still be our responsibility, but other benefits would be transferred and they'd be investigated under the auspices of the DWP. I think that is a wider issue, and it ties in with what's happening with the Audit Commissioner as to how we get national information, wider information about frauds, and what we're looking to promote are sort of local networks of sharing information which we need to develop.
It follows on from what we talked about, the publicity and knowing the exact details. We would no longer do this, but I bet we get associated with it.
We will. Other people, for those who meant up to date, the government is taking over and centralising most of the anti-fraud initiatives. And what John is saying is that how will we know how that affects Warrington? How do we get the breakdown? I think perhaps we need to write to the Secretary of State and find out, or whoever it is. Ian Duncan Smith, isn't it? No. And find out what he's got, what plans he has for us. Because it's, as you rightly pointed out, if there's fraud going on in Warrington, we'll assume it's got something to do with the council, something to do with it. So we need to keep an eye on it. So thanks for that.
I think what might come out as well in some of the other investigations, and will probably come out in agents' work on benefits, is they will be working with other agencies. So, for example, if we did more work on direct payments, we would be working with the DWP to investigate those cases.
Anything else on that? Fine, now we go back to our external auditors on the separate courier report.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take that report if I may.
Yeah.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for inviting me to attend tonight's meeting, and just to reiterate the point that you mentioned earlier, that I've now taken over from Joe as the engagement manager for the council here. So I look forward to working with you all over the forthcoming months and hopefully longer than that. In terms of the report that you've got before you this evening, this follows the normal sort of format and structure, the ones that you'll have seen in the past. The first few pages focus on the progress on the audit to date for the 2014-15 audit, and then the later pages are really for information only, but sort of national flavours and various reports that have recently been produced. If I could draw your attention then to pages 5 and 6, as I say, which is our sort of progress statement to date. Pleased to be able to report that from our perspective everything is on track at the moment. We've been in and commenced our interim audit work where we look at your systems and we walk through and document the key systems that impact on the accounts, and that started just before Christmas. And we'll be looking to bring any findings from that work within the audit plan to the March committee meeting. So again, we'll be able to give you a more detailed feedback at that meeting. In terms of the accounts, obviously, that doesn't commence until the summertime, and as you see there, we're down to do the work over the June to September period. Overleaf, the other main piece of work that we do during the year is around issuing our value for money conclusion, and as members may recall, in September time we reported the feedback from that piece of work within the audit findings report, and you had a separate standalone financial resilience report. The next few pages, as I say, are primarily for information only and also the national flavours and issues. In particular though, if I could draw your attention to page 7, this is really just to highlight that Grant Thornton has now issued its annual report on the financial resilience work around the VFM conclusion work that we do each year, and this pulls together the main messages and themes nationally from our database of clients that we audit. And in particular, it was quite a surprise, but there's an overall positive message around financial resilience this year, and in particular that we're finding that most authorities are forecasting financial resilience confidently within their medium-term financial strategy, and we feel that maybe that tipping point that was there last year and the year before might not be so serious at this stage that was previously reported. I would draw your attention to the report, and I have brought a couple of hard copies along with me this evening if any members wish to take those away. In there, the just contains some useful case studies of good practice examples that some authorities have done, including some sort of North-West authorities as well, so there might be some information there that members might find useful and informative. I wasn't necessarily intending to go into the report in any further detail, but more than happy to take any questions that the members may have.
Are there any comments?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, you just made a very interesting comment about the tipping point and the fact that it might not be happening. Perhaps could you expand on this? Have you got any views about why this might have happened? Or what's changed?
Yeah, that's a very difficult question to answer, really. I mean, obviously it's the national picture, and there's various councils throughout the country that are sort of finding their ability to respond to the current climate in different formats. Councils maybe in the North East might be struggling more so than councils in the South. It was the general view from the work that we've done, and I say the report does go into a little bit more detail, but that was mainly around some more certainty around longer term financial plans that the councils are doing, and a track record about delivering savings as well. They've been able to demonstrate a track record over a number of years, most authorities, and feel confident that they've now got those skills to go forward and identify further savings in the future.
John?
I think it's, first of all, it's to Lyndon this, is it? When did we sign off our accounts by this year? Was it in the if you look at page 10, it's auditing the accounts 2014 local government bodies. There were 352 of 356, so see an audit opinion accounts by the 30th of September. How many in that group?
Ours was signed off, I believe it was the 20-something of September.
Right. Well, the next question then follows, and it's only early days yet, but there is a plan. The government are telling us that we've got to have our accounts signed up by the 31st of July in future.
There was a consultation on that. It isn't necessarily going to happen, but as you'll be aware, we've been bringing those targets coming forward.
Yeah, this year. There's been difficult each year.
It has been difficult, although it's got easier each year. One of the things that I know was being consulted on nationally, and some of the responses that are going back nationally, actually have more to do with around the resources for our colleagues at the likes of Warrington, where they also have health clients, but they do their accounts much earlier. I think that there could be nationally a shortage of auditors if we all ended up doing our accounts that much earlier. You know, we can turn things around quickly ourselves. What I wouldn't want is for Grant Thornton to have to be trying to audit ourselves as well as our health colleagues all before the end of June.
I'm only going on with the statement in the documents. He's saying the accounts publication date for the principal bodies is likely to be brought forward from the 30th of September to the 31st of July from 2017. Now, we've never, the last change we were asked to do to try and hit the target was in 2008 and 9. And we've never hit that target in the last 5 years, I think.
So I don't follow that last part of the question, Councillor.
Oh, you just told me we're going to send our accounts off on the 22nd of September.
Our accounts have been signed off within the statutory deadline for the
Yeah,
last 4 years.
Yeah, but I'm just going through I'm just asking the questions. I'm ferreting a bit to see where we're going to be going next.
I guess until that is definitely decided that it's going to be brought that much forward, we don't know what we might need to do in order to short track our provision of putting together the final accounts.
As I was going to say, it's been a difficult job to hit those timetables already.
Yes.
And it will make it even more difficult with less staff.
It could do. I guess what we would end up doing is doing it by much shortening the process. So in terms of the detail, you might end up with a much more a set of accounts with a lot more estimates rather than being the exact detail.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have any view on what's just been July?
I think Linton makes certainly a valid point around the challenges around bringing the accounts forward. There are some councils that do have an earlier deadline, and Oldham is one where those accounts are signed off towards the end of May. Oldham, and that is one of our clients, and I know we're looking at how that is delivered, and I look forward to sharing the messages with Linton in terms of are there any top tips or things that we can talk about and work closely with you as that date moves forward and if the consultation becomes definitive. But it will be a challenge for all councils, but one that we have confidence that if the councils can prepare them earlier, then we obviously will commit to doing that as well.
And we put it in there for a reason, haven't we?
Well, yes, yeah.
And are Oldham's accounts still out?
I'm sure they're as good as yours. I mean, it's too early for me to comment on that, but I'm sure they are. I'm sure yours are.
I'm very diplomatic. Any more on that? Okay, thanks for that. Then we go to our final item, which is the work programme. Paul, you were going to contact me about an addition.
I have. Well, Chairman, it's actually on the back page. It's already listed, but there isn't a date ticked off. In light of recent events at Live Wire and Culture Warrington, might I suggest that it is sooner rather than later? And I'm wondering if it's possible that they might come and see us at our February meeting, if that's possible. I understand Jean might well have been talking to them over the last day or two with regards to that.
Yes, we spoke to them this morning, and their own audit committees in February. I do audit work for Livewire as well, so I'll be attending that meeting in February. What they will have at that audit committee meeting is all their reports from PwC, who've been doing the detailed work for them. So it might be, well, we certainly feel it would be useful to get PwC reports, attend the audit committee, and then take stock of where they are then. We certainly have to arrange our work for this year for them as a client. But that's where they are at the minute. They're just pulling everything together that PwC have done. And PwC are doing some more detailed work at the minute on their systems.
So I suppose, you know, if we're not talking February, could we possibly talk the 19th of March meeting? Is that feasible? That they come in and talk to us and explain what's gone on and how they're going to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Well, give them a firm invitation, shall we, for the month of
Yeah.
Very firm invitation.
Yeah, I think so, Chairman.
What the best word, discover the discrepancies?
Well, the discrepancies were discovered, speaking to them today, it looks as if it came out of just with their review of transactions, and that's how the discrepancies were discovered. The systems seem to be in place, but obviously the position of the person involved has been such that he's been able to circumvent the systems in any case because of his position.
Lessons for all of us there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chair, I'm not looking for a major exercise because it's obviously a lot of officers' time might be involved, but just a recent case, I'm interested in how the procurement rules actually work, because the case in mind, if it's over £5,000 you need 3 tenders, that's right. If it's for pencils or repairing the town hall walls, you can understand that's fair enough, but this was for a consultancy where essentially they probably have to spend a bit of time on self-promotion to say we are the firm to do this, and for a £5,000 contract they might be spending a few bob to do that. So I'd be interested in at the small scale, because these are national rules, obviously EU rules. So I'd be interested just to see how those things work out, both on the small scale contracts and on some of the bigger ones, where you could just do a sample of some, just to give us a view of how the system works. I'd be grateful. Everybody else may disagree.
Well, to just explain the position, we do the audit work for Livewire on a contractual arrangement with Livewire, and obviously we provide our reports through to Livewire. The key thing then for the council is to get the assurance that they need, Linton needs, as our major partners, back to the conversation we had before about our major partners here and the monies that we spend with them, and how we get the assurance from our major partners that they are managing risks and so on.
No, I wasn't thinking particular Livewire issue, but just generally the council's general contracts. And it's a regeneration scheme. And,
yes, I think with the council, we have such a lot in place for the council, don't we? Have a lot of our governance structures and so on. We mentioned strategic procurement panel before. We have a lot of scrutiny and a lot of work that goes into our procurement and our procurement team and so on. For smaller organisations, you don't have the same amount of scrutiny and overview or the same structures in place. So for our partners, and especially for smaller partners, it's a key thing for them to make sure they have the right arrangements in place as well, especially when public money is being passed over to them.
Yeah, low levels too.
I guess the other point I'd add around procurement, Chair, is that we do have financial regulations and standing orders within this council, which deem that a key decision is anything over £250,000, which of course then means that those contracts are let following a decision taken by the Executive Board. The only time when that doesn't happen is those items that have now been deemed to be operational basis and non-key decisions for the Executive Board. I think it stems from, I remember a particular example when Councillor Bowden was taking a report to Executive Board to agree to let a framework contract for janitorial and cleaning materials. It was something that was needed for cleaning services. It probably wasn't really an Executive Board decision. On the back of that, the Executive Board agreed that those decisions could be approved through the Council's Strategic Procurement Panel, but of course are reported back to this body every 6 months as to the decisions that that panel has taken as a retrospective look at those procurement decisions. The only ones that then don't get that visibility are the smaller items that are day-to-day purchasing and what have you, which often are discussed through the procurement panel, and we do have a procurement forward plan to identify what is going to be bought when and what contracts are due to be let. And maybe the focus of that extra piece of work could be around those smaller things, ensuring that there's those proper systems are in place to avoid any abuse of those contracts.
It's budget control.
It should be, but that just because it's within somebody's budget doesn't necessarily mean that they've gone through the proper procurement process.
But it could be highlighted there because this figure goes over and above what's expected. Somebody, and then it's up to officers to make themselves aware that this is the type of thing that can occur.
Okay, thanks. That might be a good question to raise during our self-assessment exercise. Okay, well that concludes the agenda. There's nothing else. And can I thank you all for your attendance. Wish you all a safe journey home and declare the meeting adjourned.
Thank you.